go. Whoop. Hold on a second.
I will watch your chat and your QA. Do you want me to shout out questions as they come, or would you prefer to wait till the end?
Yeah, they can wait. If I prefer to they wait to the end.
Gotcha. Cool.
Okay. Now I just have to get this sharing again. Oh, I am screen sharing.
Yep.
Just the wrong screen. Okay. All right, let's stop this for a second. So even if I have an impressive career, folks, I still don't know how to use Zoom. So there's that. Okay, still not doing the right one. All right, let's try here. Oh, here we go. Okay, let's try it this way. And we'll just switch these around. Okay.
You were actually right before you switched them around. Now I see your speaker view.
Well, that's not fun. Okay.
But, yep, now we're good.
Looking for the yellow rectangle. See, like I said, folks, impressive career, whatever. Okay. Hi, folks. My name is Mike Traverso. Like Sarah said, I'm the lead mobile software engineer at the New York Yankees. And I host a podcast called Friends That Code. Today, we're going to talk about ways to combat imposter syndrome. Today's talk is entitled "You Belong Here" and Other Affirmations and Ways to Beat Imposter Syndrome. But before we get into learning some ways into combating imposter syndrome, I want to make sure that everyone knows that I am not a doctor or any kind of physician of any sort. I can't stress this enough. If you feel you need professional help because of the feelings that imposter syndrome, lends to you, please seek it. Here's some contact information for some various institutions that can help. These services are recommended by the National Institute of Health. If you feel you need these resources, please seek them out. Please reach out to family and friends. This talk is just a goofy talk with identifying imposter syndrome and tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way that kind of make me not feel like an imposter all the time. So what is imposter syndrome? What is it? I'm trying to help you find ways to conquer. Imposter syndrome is the persistent inability to believe that your success is deserved, or that your success has somehow been illegitimately achieved, as though your success happened because you've been lucky and it's had nothing at all to do with your hard work. But to put it more simply, it's that voice in your head that makes you doubt yourself. That part of your brain that disregards every achievement that you've worked hard towards and makes you feel like a fraud. But why do we feel like frauds sometimes? Well, because as people in technology, what we're doing is not easy. We work with difficult to understand concepts, new languages, not so easy to solve problems, and more. And all of these already difficult concepts that we work with, they're constantly changing. And to prove how good we are to our colleagues, we need to use markers on a whiteboard, the worst development environment ever devised by humankind. Developing software isn't easy, but despite the difficulty, developing software is in fact what you do, right? You write code and you build apps, whether they be small apps, large apps, mobile apps, desktop apps, backend apps. All of these apps are developed by you and they work, usually. So speaking of writing of code, let's get into some of the fuel for imposter syndrome, that voice inside of us telling us that we're not good enough. Every day we write our code in an IDE, be it Xcode or Android Studio, Visual Studio, or whatever else you've got going on. And as we write our code, our IDEs tell us that all these warnings and errors that our work has yielded. And from time to time, as we run through our apps, these bugs are revealed to us through stack traces, these giant stack traces. So these three things, warnings, errors, and bugs, can be powerful forces to impact our confidence and fuel that voice of imposter syndrome within us. So here, we see some errors and some warnings. More warnings and errors. And this IntelliSense squiggly lines throughout your code are brutal on the eyes. And here's some of Xcode's way of telling you that you've gotten some mistakes in your code. And we've all seen this, the alert dialog with a full stack trace for a bug occurring while you run your code. Exactly what your users want to see. And then there's this. This is one of the worst ways to tell a developer that they've got mistakes. To tell them that they've taken a once happy little folder and they've murdered it. So, it's really, if you know someone on the Chrome team, tell them this is not cool. They need to stop. Okay. So as you can imagine, looking at all these symbols of warnings and errors and seeing bug stack traces throughout the day, it doesn't inspire confidence, right? So it's no wonder so many of us feel like we're imposters. Our IDEs are constantly telling us how bad we are at our job. But here's the thing. With respect to the bugs, maintenance of code is about 2/3 or more of the software development lifecycle. So mistakes happen. Don't let them ruin your day. Learn from them so that you can avoid them in the future. And if you really want to be awesome, blog about them. Blog about what you've learned so that maybe you can help someone else avoid or fix that same error as they stumble across the same issue later on in their career. More on this later. So you may be thinking, okay, hey, Mike, how do I not feel like a fraud? How do I stop that voice? Well, you do belong here. You enrolled or graduated from a 4-year school. It was hard to get into, but you did it and you made it through 4 years. Or you enrolled or you're graduating from a boot camp, an intensive boot camp that showed you how to master a bunch of technologies, some of which you didn't even know existed a few months ago. Or you taught yourself how to code all on your own. That's incredibly impressive. Or you just beat out all of the other candidates at your job. You belong here. Again, because it bears repeating, you do belong here. Focus on your previous successes to remind yourself that by no means are you where you are because of some random chance. Remember that technology is innovation and everything is changing all of the time. And so since there's constant change, you can't possibly be an expert at everything. A friend of mine, and probably a friend of yours, Nitya Narasimhan, wrote an exciting way to look at this way of looking at the world. And I'm going to paraphrase what she's written. Basically, it comes down to this. You're a beginner at the things you're not an expert in. So enjoy learning how to be better at what you're interested in. Now, this is an exciting way to look at things, right? Don't worry about that you don't know something. This is, don't worry if you look silly making mistakes. Don't worry if you need to ask for help in learning it. Because you're interested in something, let that interest fuel you. Feel that drive to learn that thing that you're interested in. Okay. Lastly, don't be too hard on yourself. Unfortunately, there are going to be plenty of folks out there in your career that are going to be out there to come down and happy to come down on you when you make a mistake. Don't help these folks out. Don't give them any assistance. Go easy on yourself. Okay. And please know that we all experience this. No one is immune to imposter syndrome. So a short while ago, I spoke with Graham Devine on my podcast. As a matter of fact, it was the last episode. And Graham Devine is this awesome game designer, game developer. He's been doing it since the 80s. He's worked on ports of Pole Position from Atari. He's done other amazing things. He's one of the people responsible for finding ways to put games and media on CD-ROMs. He's written NES games by hacking them onto existing cartridges. He's written Doom 2 and 3, Halo Wars, and many other big titles that you have probably played. So if you've ever played 7-Up Sprite, the Spot game, he's worked on that. And he's always giving talks at these big events, game developer conference. And so when he told me that he felt this imposter syndrome as well, it shocked me. And you have to realize at some point, and here's the thing with Graham, I look at someone like this with this amazing career, and to hear him say he feels imposter syndrome, it took me aback a little bit, because if he hasn't figured out how to beat this yet with his amazing career, what chance do I have? And so you have to realize, look, everyone at some point has a bad day or a bad week, and it happens and it shakes our confidence. And that little voice starts to make noise and we start second guessing our abilities. Well, what we need to do is understand that that voice isn't really you, that there's nothing wrong with your skills, and recognize that voice when you hear it. And that's important. Recognizing that voice when you hear it, identifying when it happens, it'll help you know that you need to take steps to mitigate the impact. Like, for example, it's around lunchtime for a lot of us here on the East Coast, or maybe it was. But when you get hungry, you feel it and you identify it, and hey, I have to go and get lunch. And it's the same thing. Recognize when you hear that voice in your head, and that way you have to take steps to mitigate the impact. And what can some of those steps be? One of them is affirmations. We'll talk about this. They're good, they're bad, and they're ugly. If you've ever felt imposter syndrome before, then you've experienced some of these bad kinds of affirmations. And an affirmation is just statements that you hold to be true. Now, a negative affirmation, it reinforces these negative feelings like, I'm not smart enough and I can't do this. And these are total bummers, right? And they can really set you down a path of despair. On the other hand, you have these positive affirmations and they can reinforce positive feelings. I'm smart enough for this and I can totally do this. These are inspiring. Best of all, they tell that voice in your head to pipe down. And identifying the negative affirmations that go through your head every day, that should be pretty easy. What's happening in your mind that makes you feel like a fraud? What are you doing that inspired some of those negative affirmations, right? It's recognizing that voice. And here's one that I have all the time. As a matter of fact, just a few minutes ago before I started this talk, I had this one running through my head. I'm a terrible public speaker. I get too nervous. Why do people want to listen to me? What if I can't figure out the Zoom? But I can change that, right? I can spin it around and I can make it a bit more positive. So for example, I've given lots of talks in the past, and this is something I've done before. So if I've done it before, I can do it again. And folks are usually nice to me afterwards. And sometimes they'll tell me I've helped them with something they were struggling with or a problem that they've had. So take a second right now to take some negative affirmations that you've heard in your own head and replace it with a positive one. And that positive affirmation should make you feel good about yourself or the situation that you're in. And if you doubt yourself again, just remember some of those positive affirmations so that you can repeat them again in your head and start to get yourself on the right track. And let's stay on some affirmations for a bit. Start by figuring out 3 things that make you awesome. Now, a lot of people talk about brag sheets and how you can do that, but if you don't have a lot of experience in your career, a brag sheet could be just an empty piece of paper with a couple of sentences at the top, and that's not fun to look at. So I start with just 3 things that make you awesome. And it may sound corny, but give it a try. And if you're struggling to come up with 3 things that make you awesome, you're being way too modest. Don't ask a friend. Don't be lazy. Really think about this. See the awesomeness within you. Learn to promote yourself. These positive affirmations are just you promoting yourself to you. And because if you won't buy what you're selling, why would anyone else? Why would your colleagues? Why would your boss? Show yourself some love because you deserve it. Here are my go-to positive affirmations. I've beaten late stage 3 cancer twice in my life. And if I can do that, I can totally handle some public speaking. I enjoy teaching, especially teaching people how to code, and I'm good at it. And I left one software job without a replacement just to be unemployed while learning mobile development. And it's worked out so far. Now we've got some affirmations, right? So, and they remind us how awesome we are. And keeping that in mind, keeping in mind our own awesomeness, when we're confronted with a challenge, we can reframe the "can I do this?" with "how am I going to do this?" So let's look at the difference here in these 2 ways of approaching work or just even life. So the "can I do this?" sounds a lot like this. Am I going to be able to do this? I can't do this. How am I even here right now? I've just been lucky and no one's noticed. Is now the time everyone figures me out? So there's a lot of doubt in those feelings, and it sounded like they were void. It was void. I hope so. I hope it sounded like they were void of any indication of past success at similar tasks or just at anything. So really kind of, really bummer stuff of ways to look at it. Can I do this? So how do we reframe the "can I" with "how do I do this"? Well, you have done something similar before. So since this is similar, take what you've learned from before and apply it here. and take on this new task with confidence. So maybe you've only written back-end code before, and now you're going to start to work on some front-end feature. Is it different? Yeah, absolutely. Sure it is. Different SDKs, different languages maybe, but you're going to need some of those same analytical skills, some of those same planning skills. Okay. You see where I'm going with this? Taking on a challenge is exciting. Realize that when you're done, you'll have learned some new things. Be confident in yourself, because when you've overcome similar challenges before, you can totally overcome these challenges, these new challenges in the future. Okay. Another source of fuel for imposter syndrome can be looking through job postings when you're looking for a job. Seeing these postings that are looking for people with all of the requirements that you may not have, it can be demoralizing. But job postings are always looking for unicorns. And you need to remember, you're not a unicorn. No matter what you tell yourself, you're not a unicorn. So apply anyways. What am I talking about? Well, you may already know what I'm talking about. These majestic and much sought after developers that know every language. Some of them know them 2 years before they've even been debuted. They know DevOps, they know databases, graphic design, UI, UX, and can even help the company softball team win games. Now, these job specs are littered all over the internet. I want to take a look at one with you now. Here's a unicorn posting for an experienced iOS developer. Okay, so far it looks okay. But here we see the post. It mentions experience in agile development. And this sought after unicorn needs to be so experienced in agile development that they've listed it twice. We see the iOS developer should have experience with promises. And natively, Swift doesn't have promises, and neither does Objective-C. And they want someone enthusiastic about continuous integration and deployment. Remember, this is for an iOS developer. They want 4+ years as an iOS developer, but it doesn't mention how many years of experience the iOS developer needs to have at continuous integration and deployment. So, side tip, when you're trying to get a job and try to be a generalist, that's fine. I mean, it's great to have other skill sets, but it's another thing to be doing 2 jobs and getting paid for one. So that's just a side tip. And lots of times you'll see preferred qualifications. And this one bugs me, because a lot of the time, these are things that if you had time to sit down and read through a tutorial or a well-written blog post or watch a YouTube video made by an expert, you'd probably understand what they're asking you for, and you'd have that quote unquote qualification. And again, have they mentioned Agile yet? All right, so don't sweat these job posts. If you think you can satisfy half or more of the requirements, apply. Keep in mind, they're written by either junior people in HR, people in an HR farm, people that just don't know technology, or people that just doing their job, or worse, the folks that know better, and they're just trying to make a hiring manager happy and they just want it all. So again, don't let these job specs make you feel inadequate. Apply anyways, and feel confident that you're not wasting your time. Okay, network. Finding a job on Monster or Career Builder, Indeed, Dice, is incredibly tough. It's almost mythical. But because here's what's happening. You're essentially cold calling businesses and asking them to hire you or to buy you. And that's incredibly tough, right? Especially if you're not in sales, right? We're all in software. So how can we get results, right? Honestly, I have no idea. I'm not here to talk about that. But I do know that the best jobs you're going to find are going to be jobs that when someone in your network will turn you on to, right? Those are the best jobs you're going to find. And networking with folks, establishing meaningful relationships within the community, it gives you a head start or a foot in the door. And that means you're going to need to go to meetups, even if they're virtual, and introduce yourself. Have a question for the speaker. Reach out to them after the meetup or webinar. Ask them questions, interact on Twitter, wink, wink, folks, communicate, be part of the community. Even if you think your questions may be silly, ask them anyway. I'm going to get to more of that in a bit. Oh, and if you're running a virtual meetup, try if you can to budget some time to have everyone introduce themselves. It's incredibly valuable to get the community talking together and to really feel like a community. And when life gets back to normal and we're back together again, it's important to remember to introduce yourselves to others. Too often we sit in a room waiting for a meetup or a talk to begin, and we just sit, we stare at our phones, and we ignore all the potential leads for new jobs or new clients that are in that room. Connect to people on Twitter and LinkedIn, not Facebook, not Snapchat, not TikTok. I know I might sound like an old man saying this, but Twitter and LinkedIn are where you go to network for jobs. And I can still say that because I know most of the people that are hiring are old people like me. So, um, one other thing is be supportive by reading other colleagues' blog posts, looking at their videos if they post them online, and tell them something positive that you thought about their work. Reshare and like their social media posts if you're really enjoying them. Be a positive force in that community. Everyone wants to work with someone, that positive person that isn't shy about giving honest praise of other people's hard work. Keep learning, don't get stale. Feeling like you're not progressing along as you watch your colleagues or people on social media progress, it's high octane fuel for imposter syndrome. So some ways to kind of handle this: join a meetup group, sign up for your Udacity course, take advantage of your company's training budget and time, read up on important subjects that are important to you. Whatever way of learning new things is your jam, do it. Pursue new interests and learn about them. So are you a mobile developer that's interested in machine learning? Well, take a class, sign up for an online course, read a book on machine learning, whatever it is. You're not going to become a data scientist overnight, but you need to take those initial steps in that direction if that's what you're interested in. And a great way to solidify what you know is to teach someone else. If you have to give a talk or write a blog post about something, you're going to be doing two things. And the first is that you're going to do as much research as you possibly can on the topic to put together a talk that makes you look good in front of your peers. Right? Nobody likes to come up and be unprepared and speaking and kind of look like they're look frankly like an ass. Nobody wants that. It's embarrassing. And the second is that now that you've written all this stuff down, whether it's been on a blog post or a slide, it means that you're going to have a better chance of remembering what you've presented. And then if you don't remember, well, guess what? You've got the blog post or you've got the slide deck that you can come back to and refer back to because you've written it down. So that's an awesome feature. And stay thirsty, staying actively learning new things. It's going to help you feel like you're doing your part to stay relevant in our ever-changing field. Don't align yourself with your work product. Put simply, I mean, you're not your work. With your work product, remember, your boss isn't trying to make you miserable most of the time. They're not giving you unrealistic deadlines or changing priorities seemingly on a whim just to make you miserable. Most likely they have a boss who has a boss who has a boss. You get the idea. And all of these people deal with the request of a VC or a customer who can change their mind on a whim. And because they change their direction, that direction changes a lot. Change with it. Leave previous problems unsolved if that's required. How many times have you been in the middle of some really important task that you've, really kind of drilled down into, to only to be pulled away by some other more important task? It's incredibly frustrating. And because we measure our work in sprints, sometimes it can feel like you've wasted an entire sprint and showing nothing for it. And if this happens enough during the course of a time period, like I was saying, it can make you feel like you're not accomplishing what you thought you could have accomplished. While you may have ideas on how things can run more efficiently, just remember one thing. As long as you're still employed, you're still getting that paycheck. Whether you're working on task A or task B, your paycheck's still going to show up. So go with the flow. Move on to the next task or challenge with some grace. Okay, to my point earlier about not aligning yourself with your work product, try getting yourself a hobby. Reading non-technical books, exercising, woodworking, whatever it is that floats your boat. Become a full person without letting a job define you. And if you can't figure out something or you're truly too busy to schedule your time, if you're truly too busy, go ahead and schedule time. Put it on your calendar to go outside, stand in the rain, walk in the sun. Doesn't matter. Go outside. Get away from your desk. Vitamin D is a great source of mood enhancement in a positive way, right? That's why in the summertime, everybody's very happy. We've got a lot of sunshine. In the wintertime, people are kind of gloomy because we don't have a whole lot of sunshine during the day. So get your vitamin D, schedule it. And on that note of detaching yourself from your work a bit, detach from social media as well. Now, I know everybody sits here and tells you, hey, follow me here, follow me here. I'm going to tell you to follow me on Twitter. Sierra's told you to follow Women Who Code on Twitter, and that's great. Do that. But detaching from social media just means, hey, give yourself a break from it once in a while. Okay. Here's an example of how too much social media can stir up really negative feelings of imposter syndrome. Let's just say you finished a project, and in that project that required you to put your skills in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to the test. And you're super happy with what you've done. You're on a high. You've got those feelings of having finished something awesome. Great for you. You've been head down on it, and you feel like you've missed out what's been going on in the world. And sometimes that can be a good thing. But in this case, you figure you're going to go on to social media and you're going to see what's been going on in the world while you were working. So you come across the first article, and it's clickbaity, and it has this title that says C++ developers earn the most money. And this makes you feel pretty lousy because you don't code in C++. So I guess there goes that new Tesla. That's a bummer. All right, I see a social media post. Real developers use Linux and Vim. Well, you don't use Linux, and maybe you don't know what Vim is. Does this make you a fake developer? More feelings of lousiness stirring up. Oh, this is a good one. The infamous, what's stopping you from coding like this? Where those little green boxes on your GitHub account show how many commits you've made, somehow as if that's supposed to be an indicator of your worth as a developer. More lousy feelings. And sometimes you'll see a tweet where someone questions whether you're a senior developer because of whether you use a mouse or you don't use a mechanical keyboard. So, and this can really be a bummer, right? It's demoralizing. You go to social media for fun, for connecting to people in the community, right? Sure, but please remember, social media, it encourages us to compare ourselves to our peers. And those peers have differing levels of experience than our own. And sometimes social media, and a lot of times social media encourages us to compare ourselves to just random internet trolls who are just there to stir stuff up. So did anybody get uncomfortable when I mentioned whether or not they use a mouse or Vim or what OS they use or the green boxes or mechanical keyboard? Well, to my point, anything can be used to make you second guess yourself. From the languages you know to the OS, yes, even something as silly as a mouse or a keyboard. Okay. So first things first, stop scrolling. Take very long breaks from social media. And second, and I can say this because coming close to dying a couple of times in my life because of cancer has helped me realize something incredibly important. All right, so really pay attention, because if you get nothing out of this talk then this is the one you get. This is the one you should get. Stop giving a damn about what other people think about you. Take a long look around the people that you work with and follow on social media. They may be fantastic people, great people. Doesn't matter what they think about you. Don't care. Okay. Pardon my French. I'm going to say it again. Stop giving a damn what other people think of you, regardless of how great you may think they are. Now, Disney says this a little bit better, right? Hakuna Matata. It's a wonderful phrase. It means no worries. It ain't no passing craze. Any Disney nerds, hello. Okay, in all seriousness though, stop scrolling, or better yet, put your phone in a drawer and forget it's there for a bit. If you really need some help in the short term, uninstall your social media apps from your phone. One, you can put them back, and two, sometimes the web experience isn't as good as the native experience, and so that'll help keep you away. And you still have to type it in the command bar, so that extra effort will kind of keep you away. So one of the things you need to do is try to be happy with what you are doing. And social media helping us compare ourselves to other people isn't good. What we really need to be doing is comparing ourselves to our own self. Now, comparing yourself again to your other people, not going to make you happy, but comparing yourself to yourself yesterday, last week, or last month, or last year, or 5 years ago, then you can start to see how you've progressed, and that can make you happy. So for example, in my personal career, 10 years ago, I didn't know how to write a mobile app. 5 years ago, I wrote the iOS and Android apps for Twitter, Twitter's developer conference, Flight. 4 years ago, I wrote an app for a presidential campaign. And last month, I had no experience with a particular part of an iOS SDK. And last week, I shipped an app where I'm using that new framework. Focus on what you're doing and not what other people are doing. Okay, last bit of advice, enjoy some self-care. Make a point of scheduling this if you really need to. Do I mean like, going to a spa and getting pampered and all that kind of stuff? Maybe, if that's your thing, sure, absolutely. But anything that's not tech related, go talk to friends, go for a walk, read a book, get your mind some time to decompress. Because too often we're stressed out with crazy schedules and tons of work, and it's just not the healthiest way to live. And decompressing from time to time can help you stay in a positive mood and keep that imposter syndrome at bay. All right. And that's it. I hope, like I said, we covered a lot here and a lot of little tips and tricks, but the big ones are, what are the 3 things that make you awesome? And keeping those affirmations in your mind so that you can say them to yourself over and over. And remember, don't care what other people think about you as you're learning something new. You are putting in the effort. Someone mocks you because you have a question. That's their problem. Let them deal with their issues. Your focus on you and what you need to be doing for yourself and your happiness. And that's it. My name is Mike Traverso. And like I said, I'll tell you where you can follow me on social media. I'm on @Traversoft or @FriendsThatCode. And you can check out the podcast and where to listen to it at anchor.fm/FriendsThatCode. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here today, Mike. We do have a few minutes if anyone wants to ask any more questions or any advice. You have a really active chat. I know that I love the sun thing, spending some time in the sun. I miss that during the winter months. We do have a question that came in through the QA. Mike, how do you deal with continuous failures and successes when successes are hard to come by?
Sometimes you kind of have to not look towards, maybe career successes and kind of focus on other things that are going on in your life that you've been successful at. Have you been, going to the gym, or you've been on the treadmill a lot? Have you, maybe it's something as simple as like, hey, I did 10 push-ups today, and yesterday I did 5. Whatever you can find that you can use to be positive, that's what you have to use. And as your career progresses, because remember, careers don't happen overnight. And this is why I tell people to stay away from social media so much, is because you're going to look at someone like for example, a Scott Hanselman, and he's got a lot of great experience, but he's done that over decades. And so if you're new starting out and you're like, oh man, how do I get a podcast? How do I get that many thousands of followers? How do I get, this career? Like, you can't overnight. Like, you've got to put in the work, and it takes a lot of time. So, focus on what you've got that's going on positive in your life. And those are some of the things that you build up on. Those 3 awesome things that I was telling folks to use, those can change. You can update those as you go through. So I hope that was helpful.
Another question. What if your boss mocks you for asking a question? I agree with you in spirit, but the reality is there is a culture of ridicule in the tech community.
Well, yeah. So I've never come across bosses that mock you for asking a question. If a boss mocks you for asking a question, that's a good indication that you probably need to find somewhere else to work. It's plain and simple. People like that, it's a shame that they exist and mock you, but that's a shortcoming that they have to deal with. And so if you really like where you're at, and the advice of me saying, hey, go find somewhere else to work, that's obviously not the best advice. But here's something fun to think about, that when someone mocks you for asking a question because you didn't understand something, you have to understand that's because they're inadequate. And because they're inadequate at something, you can laugh at that and be like, oh, well, I asked the question because I didn't understand something, and this bozo over here is mocking me. What a clown. And know that in a few years, you're probably going to be his or her boss. So that's something that's fun to think about. I hope that helped, Lois.
Yeah, and I would just add also that communities like Women Who Code are around if you can't leave your job and you do need those questions answered. There are really helpful communities out there to get those questions answered when it's appropriate.
Yeah. And for support, like these types of meetup groups, the Women Who Code in general, Women Who Code Mobile, go to these groups for that kind of, support, emotional, and technology support. Sorry, Lois.
I'm brand new to coding, learning Swift as my first language with the 100 Days of Swift UI. What is something someone who has to ask a lot of questions should hear? Because I always feel like I ask too many questions.
Yeah, I mean, there's no such thing as too many questions, especially if you're just starting out. If you really want to kind of avoid that, one thing could be to kind of, watch YouTube videos of people doing Swift UI coding or read blog posts of tutorials. Understand nobody is teaching. I don't, at least, I know Stanford does it, and there's very few schools that actually in college will teach you mobile development as a major. So a lot of the stuff that people are doing are things that they've picked up or either by reading, documentation or reading tutorials or watching YouTube videos or just by messing around. So yeah, that's that. But don't feel bad about asking questions.
Um, Laura says she is about to embark on her official coding journey. Monday, I begin as a software engineering bootcamp at a software engineering bootcamp through App Academy. I am very nervous about being taken seriously as an engineer when I'm done. Have you come across bootcamp grads that are actually get considered for jobs?
Yes, I have. See, you do want to make sure though that the bootcamp can help you find jobs and see what their job placements have been recently. I know it's been tough out there recently, but if you're just going into it, you're going to be coming out into hopefully a better economic environment. So, but yes, bootcamp developers do get considered for jobs. It's a matter of what not so much where you graduated from. I find that to be interesting now that I spent a lot of money on a 4-year university. So shoot, 20 years ago, and you look back and you're like, wow, I wish these boot camps existed then, because I probably wouldn't have spent so much just so I can get my foot in the door and learn other concepts as I go along. So yes, you can get a job.
Sarah asks, what do you think companies can do to help combat imposter syndrome?
Well, they can have bosses that don't mock you for asking questions. That's one. What can companies do? I think you can have seminars and really, bring in people that, if you're asking for the company, you can bring in professionals that understand what imposter syndrome is and really speak towards, how to combat it. You can set up a YouTube video like this and ask people to watch it if you thought this was helpful. There's a lot of different things that companies can do, but ultimately, you have to understand imposter syndrome is something we all feel inside, and nobody wants to admit that they have inadequacies, right? That's the thing about imposter syndrome, is that you're not out there advertising it. And so a company is not going to see it as something to really mitigate, because from their perspective, a lot of people don't go to their boss and say, hey, I have imposter syndrome. Can you help me? So there aren't a whole lot of resources for that. But if you know someone who has it, can direct them to other resources. There's a lot of great TED Talks on the subject. So yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of resources for, companies to pull in and bring in.
I've noticed being a perfectionist feeds imposter syndrome. What can we do to stop being so hard on ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, practice not giving a shit is a huge thing. I mean, I'm serious. It's not something that you can learn overnight, but you have to practice doing it. So sometimes it's something like, hey, that pixel is 2 pixels off. I should change it. And I know this sounds ridiculous to a lot of people who are designers, but leave it. Leave it out there, and it's okay. It's okay for something to be 2 pixels off. It's okay for you to have spent a day trying to solve a problem, and then you realize, oh, it's this simple thing. it's okay to say to yourself, I'm not perfect. Because if you are, that's fantastic for you, but nobody else is, as much as they like to advertise it. And again, social media doesn't help because it's a way for people to kind of present this fake version of themselves where everything kind of works. So, that's not helping either. But to what can you do? Yeah, it's practice not caring. Figure out the 3 steps figure out the 3 affirmations that you have that you can tell yourself to remind yourself that you're awesome. Those are the only really, and the other tips that I mentioned in the talk.
So that is it for the questions we have now. Mike, I just want to thank you again so much for
Sure.
being here and for kicking off our 2021 webinars. I thought it was such a great way to start the year. And then thank you for everyone who joined us. I hope to see you all on the Women Who Code Mobile Slack. I saw that Vivian posted the channel, the link to join. And then we will see you hopefully next Friday for our next webinar.